Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. If you're in the UK and wherever you're at, I hope that the next sort of half hour or so will be really helpful for you. Obviously, you might have seen over LinkedIn or through the Understanding Recruitment LinkedIn page that today is basically going to be a breakdown of the Java report based off trends, insights accumulated over 2023 data. So that's what we'll be unpacking today. There is a chat box, so please feel free throughout this entire live to drop any comments, questions. It can be a really interactive session. If there's anything that I discuss that you would like more information on, really excited to kind of be able to engage with, software developers if you're watching, heads of talent acquisition, or anyone that also recruits tech professionals, as well as hiring managers themselves. If you are a CTO, manager, head of development, that is finding this information really valuable for potentially growth that will be happening this year, or just having a bit more of an understanding about the Java market and where it's at. So if we've not spoken before, I noticed that a lot of the attendees on here I will have spoken to over the phone, so this might be the first time that you see my face, but I'm Charlotte and I'm the head of Java and Kotlin recruitment here at Understanding Recruitment. We are a boutique tech specialist recruitment agency based in the UK and also have an office out in the US. And we've actually recently started a new branch of our business solely focusing on green tech and renewables sectors as well. So that's just worth mentioning in case that's something that's on your radar or something that you might be interested in as well. Keep an eye out on our LinkedIn page for any updates in that sector too. But I just thought before I would actually go in straight into the report, I just introduce myself first, just to kind of give a little bit of context as to kind of where this report has come from, what I do every day, so that hopefully you kind of understand where all of this information, has come from, and more importantly, how it can be utilized sort of within your organization based off the insights that I find. So I've been working at Understanding for 5.5 years now. I've worked my way up, heading up the Java and Kotlin team. And I have only worked in the Java sector since joining Understanding Recruitment. So all day, every day, for the last 5.5 years, I've been either speaking to Java developers all across the world, or whether it be actual hiring managers that hire Java developers, all the way through to talent teams that recruit Java developers themselves. And recently, with the kind of increasing popularity and kind of big synergy between Java and Kotlin, that is something that we've started to integrate as well. As if you are working with Kotlin within your team, you might be struggling to find talent in that area. And Java is a really good language where there's actually quite a tech agnostic background where you can actually transition really easily. So I'll mention it now, but my colleague Kirsty will be actually hosting the Kotlin report breakdown on the 6th of Feb at 11 a.m. So if Kotlin is also something that's part of your tech stack, or again, you want to just find a bit more out about the Kotlin market specifically, feel free to join her LinkedIn Live as well. Might as well say it now, but if you would like to connect with me on LinkedIn, please feel free to just click that connect button on my profile, and equally, you can contact me via email. It's cyoung@understandingrecruitment.com. Even after this session, if there's anything that you want to find out in a bit more detail, or maybe have insights that are a bit more tailored to your personal situation or career, or equally your organization, that's something that I'm able to do as well. Okay. So just setting the scene for this report, just before we kind of dive in. So I think it's really important to sort of tell you all how I've actually, inputted all of this information and where it's come from. So all of the information in this report is from genuine 100% first-hand experience that myself and my team have had over the last 12 months, obviously recruiting across the Java and Kotlin sector combined. So these are really kind of current trends that we're seeing from discussions with the engineers we talk to as candidates every day, but also what we're noticing from managers, CTOs, CEOs, and also heads of talent as well. And we've kind of merged this all together to hopefully create a really transparent view and perspective of what everything looks like right now. And this is really off the back of quite a turbulent year in tech. I don't think it needs to kind of be explained 10 times over that 2023 was a very big year for the tech industry. And unfortunately, it wasn't sometimes in the most positive of ways. What we saw right from the beginning, January 2023, was so many of the FANG, but also, huge global corporations start a layoff process. And that was off the bat of a crazy, if anything, 2021 and 2022, where the tech industry absolutely boomed during the post kind of the COVID start. With the opportunities for remote working. There was so much investment going into tech at the time, as it was a sector that actually, despite the challenges that COVID faced, as long as maybe you've got your laptop and some Wi-Fi connection, you could work from anywhere. So it was less so affected as several other sectors, including travel or hospitality. So there was a big surge in tech, a lot of people wanting to move jobs to find companies that were maybe offering more remote benefits. And what that subsequently led to was maybe some companies actually hiring more than they needed or hiring unsustainably, which is sometimes no fault of their own. The market was going in certain ways, but I think it's just really important for people to understand the context of what happened last year, and therefore kind of understand that what happened in 2023 was something that we actually genuinely hadn't seen in the last 5 years, or at least in my experience in the Java market. So really excited. I can see some comments through. You will absolutely be able to be asking questions. Please feel free to. I'm really interested to hear where you're all listening from today. I'm based just outside London. The weather is awful, but please drop where you're listening from. I find it really interesting because today we will principally be focusing on the UK market, the European one, and the USA, sort of North America as well. If there are any listeners outside of those locations, be it potentially the Middle East or Australia, that's fine as well. I have done a lot of recruitment in those sectors too, but I've tried to keep the report as concise as possible, sort of covering as much as I can with where obviously the Java and Kotlin markets are increasing, but likely doing the Kotlin one. So what we saw last year is a complete lack of investment across all sectors. And, this was even outside of tech. But within tech, there were kind of two key areas that if there was investment, it was either in anything to do with AI or generative AI, or if you were in the renewables or green tech sector. And as such, that's why, the whole sector as a whole took a massive hit with the layoffs that we saw, and companies very much transitioning to reducing the headcount to obviously try and tackle the obstacles when it came to cash flow problems or restructuring. And I spoke to so many really, really talented developers last year that unfortunately were caught in all of this. And kind of, experiencing redundancy, layoffs, etc. And I think actually the trends that I've been noticing over the first, even 3 weeks of this year is we are once again, unfortunately, going through a second round of that. I've been speaking recently to a lot of developers that have been kind of affected by the layoff situation that we're currently seeing at the moment. So that was a bit of context before I kind of dive into the report. But yeah, like I said, please feel free to write messages and ask questions if it's maybe relevant to the page that I'm on. If not, don't worry, there will absolutely be a Q&A at the end where we can go through any extra insights, or I can answer any questions that haven't been covered by the report so far. So let's dive in. So just a little bit of a recap if you have just joined. Java is is remaining a really strong programming language and choice for quite a lot of different sectors. Obviously, you have to be using in the tech industry the right tool for the right job. And whilst Java is over 25 years old now, what we are seeing is that it is actually still being used quite prominently globally. There has been the recent introduction, or Kotlin is already 6 or 7 years old now. I even met Andre Breslav, the creator of Kotlin, at a recent tech meetup, and we were talking about its growth. But Java is still around, and I think its uses in the last 5.5 years have really kind of stepped up a notch, in the sense that Java is also now actually being applied sometimes in machine learning cases as well, machine learning and AI. It was typically always Python before, but what I've seen is that those who are hopping onto the AI and Gen AI bus, which we should definitely all be doing because that's the way that tech is going, a few of them do utilize Java on the back end. So that's really, really important and worth mentioning as well. But what we saw, sort of maybe something that's affecting the software developers that are listening today, is that what we saw in 2023 did define a shift in the salaries that we had previously seen in 2021 and 2022, which actually completely boomed. There was a massive, massive hike in the salary ranges that people were being able to secure, both salary wise, but also benefits and compensation wise, with regards to maybe 100% remote working. I was sometimes speaking to developers that were being able to get, £40,000 increases on their base salary, just from making a switch and getting remote working. Not saying that's the case for everyone, but there was definitely sometimes a 20, if not 30% hike in their salary from just moving in that period. And last year was, if anything, just a complete retraction from that. It completely stabilized. And if anything, due to the layoffs that happened in 2023, a lot of, really strong engineers out there were happy to consider salaries even below what they had previously been on in order to kind of secure a job. What we saw is that there has been a continuance for kind of preferred remote working, of course, having those flexibilities, regardless if that's the way that you prefer working or if you've got childcare arrangements, etc. But a big thing that we saw was also hybrid work becoming sort of more popular than it had been across the last 2 years. As mentioned already, the rising popularity of AI, green tech, and also worth mentioning that if your project or the product that your company is building or working on is anything to do with a strong social, humanitarian, or environmental issue with a strong vision and mission to improve those sectors, that always does extremely well in terms of sort of like candidate popularity when it comes to their job positions as well. So what we anticipate in this year is that I will definitely be seeing kind of more AI and green tech scale ups because of the investment in these areas last year. I think it will continue to grow. And I think what we'll see as well, given that cybersecurity, even zero knowledge increasing, amongst the tech sector, is a big increase in AI-driven cybersecurity solutions as well. Tech-wise, really important, we will be going through this as well, but as far as the kind of key Java skills, so I often see that with the companies that I work with and also the software developers that I speak to, there are kind of two sides to the Java team, so to speak. So one side is very much focused on the kind of core Java, multi-threading, low latency, concurrency, high throughput side, which is very native to, the investment banking sector, a lot of kind of financial organizations as well. Really kind of key to build things from scratch with, hundreds, thousands, millions of messages being kind of run all at once. And then you do have the other kind of side of Java, which is more the enterprise side, working with Spring frameworks. Like Spring Boot is obviously very, very popular and efficient too. But public cloud has obviously completely, over the last couple of years, been rolled out, I would say, globally now. Microservices architecture, DevOps tools like Docker and Kubernetes, and Kotlin as well is on the rise too, as discussed. There's definitely been a bit more of an uptake, I'd say, in terms of requirements where companies are now looking, for example, for message brokers experience. So whether that be Kafka or RabbitMQ, that seemed to kind of go up a little bit last year. So worth noting that too, if you're a developer that hasn't actually worked with those technologies yet, could be great to have a read about them, or kind of find online some courses that you can maybe sign up to kind of learn the basics and kind of see if it can maybe be efficient for the work that you're even doing at the moment. So moving on, we've talked about the layoffs already, budget cuts, and obviously FANG normally paving the way for what happens within the tech sector, which is why, you know, that all kind of filtered down almost like a waterfall effect to the SMEs and scale ups too. So 3 key things that if you are a CEO, CTO, head of software development or head of engineering listening, I did a lot of work last year actually just having really personal conversations about how they were managing this their teams and their projects given the challenges that last year kind of threw at the tech sector. And I think it was really important to have those discussions with them, because I think that when you are in an organization, they had very kind of tunneled visions on how well they were doing within their sector. But I think obviously the beauty of my chats is that I speak to so many different companies every month, so many different candidates. I speak to engineering, I speak to talent. So I have a more kind of bigger picture perspective of the market than maybe just their kind of product and how it fits into their sector. So we were having discussions, they were looking for advice, they were sometimes just looking for reassurance that if they were having certain issues, they weren't alone in this journey. And there were kind of 3 key themes that, from speaking with decision makers in tech and specifically kind of Java, that I was kind of seeing time and time and again. So the first key one is the migration to Kotlin. Like I said, if you've just joined, my colleague Kirsty in 2 weeks' time will be doing the same report, but very much for the Kotlin sector. This one's Java specific. But what we saw is a lot of companies, especially that kind of 50 to 200 person SME scale, discussing migrating to Kotlin. It's obviously it's all about using the right tools for the right job, but it has been seen to be more efficient and have its advantages over Java. And if you actually haven't really considered the idea of Kotlin, I would definitely recommend having a look at Andre Breslav, who founded or created, he's the language designer when he was at JetBrains, and really trying to understand its uses and how actually in some cases it can be more efficient, faster, more optimized than just kind of maybe Java 17 that you're using. The second key theme was the push for ED&I, which has been obviously on the tech agenda for a really long time. A really big effort, I think, in the last few years to help reduce that divide that has, you know, really made its way through tech when it comes to sort of the male female split. We'll be talking about that a little bit more in a second, but a lot of companies really taking time, and importantly so, to promote culture and an inclusive environment. And it's just worth mentioning that that does extend beyond gender. It's all sorts of backgrounds, diversity, neurodiversity within that as well. Sort of many different aspects of what ED&I actually considers. And then the final one is obviously something we talked about already, managing the cash flow. Lots of companies, you know, just to be honest, it was very difficult for them. A lot of them had to make layoffs due to the cash flow issues and not having much left in the bank. So really trying to manage that as best as possible. If you were a company that was hiring last year, instead of maybe in the past you'd have hired 2 mid-levels to do the work or to kind of help the team, it was all about trying to, utilize that money as best as possible. So actually having maybe just one senior developer instead kind of take that. So just more for you to know, if you are in talent or again in a kind of hiring manager position, like we recruited across so many different sectors, whether it was green tech, health tech, AI. Obviously, you'll be able to see on the report, but basically any sector is something that we were able to kind of help companies with. Obviously, because of the investment going into certain places, there was definitely more demand from my AI clients and green tech ones to really kind of push growth strategies last year. But if it was just a case of a few backfills, it was generally across most sectors, to be honest, if there was just someone leaving or there was need for maybe one extra pair of hands. Let me scroll down. So in terms of the UK, like I said, I've split this across the UK, Europe, and the US. So these are just some kind of key stats that maybe you were or were not aware of, but just to kind of understand how big these talent pools are that, myself and my team are working with or trying to tap into with the best candidates out there day to day. Key things to mention, I would say, is the gender split in the industry, which in the UK I think has actually improved over the last few years. So that's nice to see an 83-17% split, but still so much more to be done in that sector. And I think just really key, we can see both across Europe and the UK, for example, that the average length of time that a software developer is staying, or a Java software developer is staying within their role or within their company at the moment, is actually 1.5 years. Whether that be to change product, to get their hands on some new technologies, to try a different sector, to really advance their skills. That's what we're seeing. So as a company, if you are obviously in talent listening to this, if your attrition rate or length of tenure is maybe 3 years plus, I would say you're doing really, really well in keeping your developers happy and making it a really engaging place for them to kind of continue learning, but want to stay as part of the team as well. For the US, actually a better gender split. The US has a little bit of a different culture, I would say, to Europe when it comes to hiring, but it's great to see that actually on their ED&I journey, they are actually maybe per se a bit more ahead than us. The US recruit a bit differently, I would say, in my opinion, just from what I've experienced, in the sense that they aren't actually maybe as focused on language background, but more on the size of the company and where they're at in terms of their funding round. So you could be a Python engineer applying for a Java position in Europe. That would be quite difficult because they really would want you to be from a Java background. In the US, they're kind of more open. If the Python company that you came from is at a similar funding, in a similar kind of funding stage as to this new company, they'd be pretty open to it, because it just means that actually you've got more experience, maybe working in a kind of similar size startup or scale up. So that's typically what we've been seeing, but subsequently what we've seen is that actually people move around a bit quicker over there as well, like just shy of they just stay in a company just over a year. So where is the Java talent located? Obviously, it kind of goes without saying that, London is one of the global tech hubs, but what we're seeing is obviously a rise in Manchester. If you are in Scotland, Glasgow is actually a little bit bigger than Edinburgh, but very similar in size in terms of talent. Bristol as well, as a result of the universities in that sector. In Europe, so key areas where we find many Java developers, Romania is one of those, Ukraine if we're looking at Eastern Europe, and Paris has become actually over the last few years quite a big tech hub as well, and the Netherlands too. In the US, obviously some big names in there, New York, Boston. So Boston's actually where our other branch of Understanding Recruitment sits. Notably, that's where MIT and Harvard are. but also San Fran and Dallas being actually quite a key riser in terms of its tech population there. A lot in Austin too, we've been noticing over the last couple of years. So probably some big names here that everyone will have heard of and know of. So these are just very quickly sort of 8 of the biggest companies employing the most Java developers. So we've got obviously Meta in there. We've got we've got investment bank JP Morgan. Like I said, Java very much seems to be, because it's been around for a while, you know, many of the initial kind of investment banking tech stack center around Java. And in Europe, this is who's hiring the most Java developers as well. And for the US, probably no big surprises in this one. So what we did, the Java team here at Understanding and Java specialism when it comes to headhunting has been going around for a really long time. So we have a really extensive database of Java developers, mostly in the UK, but genuinely globally as well. And what I did before building this report, so I think it was October, November time last year, is I sent out a survey to those thousands of Java specialized professionals. I also included the Kotlin ones as well, just due to their kind of similarities. But I released a survey with quite a few questions because I was really interested in actually having first-hand opinions that I've gathered myself through the network that I've built. And a really key thing is obviously remote working, and it has been over the last kind of few years, but 81% of these respondents to my survey said that they would not accept a job that didn't offer remote or some degree of flexible working. So I think that's really important. I have seen a few companies recently migrate back to the 5-day a week in office policy, and it has been really detrimental. Like there are always going to be software developers who do it. I'm a people person. I come into the office every day because I enjoy it, but I think it's not having that choice that, you know, limits a lot of software developers, or personal circumstances at home or arrangements. So again, if you are in HR or talent acquisition, it could be worth bringing up with the teams that moving forward, there really does need to be some sort of flexibility on the hybrid situation or remote working, because you will really cut yourself short with the talent pool if so. I'll quickly whip through this one. So, you know, universities producing Java developer talent, you know, it's pretty much most universities in the UK obviously have a computer science department. So there's a list of them there, but I would say it's actually most UK universities. Across Europe, they tend to have more specialized universities, like based on subject, which is a bit different to the UK. So any kind of technical universities, as you can see, University of Technology obviously normally has a very, very high turnover of kind of graduates that come out knowing how to program in Java. Same for the US as well. Fields of study, of course, is probably not a shock to anyone here that if you are a Java developer, you have most likely done computer science at university or any kind of variation within that, IT, software engineering. I'm sure this is quite an important page that quite a lot of you have waited for. So especially if you are a software developer, this will be really key for you to understand a little bit more in terms of maybe where you sit within the kind of ranges, maybe see if you're getting kind of paid fairly, I guess, compared to the kind of average in your location. But it's very, very important to understand the changes and transitions that have happened in the sector. And if you are obviously hiring yourself as a CTO, any Java developers or in talent acquisition, like this could be a really good gauge of sort of where you sit compared to, you know, maybe a key competitor that you're trying to kind of poach talent from, or trying to kind of get first dibs on maybe candidates that are interviewing at both places. So I won't obviously read every single stat in here, but what I would be saying as kind of key points, the entry level for a graduate, again, this is very dependent on sector. The fintechs is always towards the higher end of these ranges, but entry level can start in the UK at 30k. I have placed someone, with zero experience before last year on 55k just off the bat, coming out of a Russell Group university. It can be done. The right company wants to hire them and they have the right skill set. Slowly, obviously, increasing as time goes on. Engineering managers these days. So this is a split between an engineering manager if you're hands-off, 50-50, or hands-on. We see 120k plus. And then Europe, a little bit under that kind of UK average, I would say. Obviously, the euro and pound do have different weights, but this is just more of a generalization across Europe. So there will obviously be some Western countries, I would say France, Germany, and the Netherlands, and even Scandinavia, that actually in some cases will have ranges higher than the Europe ones I've put, but I've really tried to make it as general as possible. Someone's asked in the chat, does having a master's increase salary for entry level? And that is actually quite a good question, which I haven't addressed in this one. And I will be honest, I will say in my 5.5 years experience recruiting Java developers, a master's doesn't add per se any weight to your salary. What I will say it will do is put you above another candidate that doesn't have one. But I have never experienced working with a company, and I've worked with hundreds over like my last 5 years, that has said, oh, because they've got a master's, we'll pay them X amount more than the other person we've hired that doesn't. But what it does do is when you're in an interview process as a candidate with the master's, if it's obviously super specific to the area or sector or industry that the company that you're interviewing at maybe sits in, that will definitely give you the edge, and it's seen as a kind of maybe more relevant skill set. So I would say that no, it doesn't impact salary, but it does maybe put you just one step ahead of someone that doesn't have a master's. I hope that answers the question. Cool, moving on. So here's for the US as well. So this is where there are differences in the US and European Java recruitment culture. And it's really difficult. It's really difficult to kind of break down exactly why per se this is. But the US very much break down their salary ranges depending on obviously the size of the company, because the US put a lot more emphasis on the equity and RSUs than the actual salaries themselves. Obviously, I'm sure if you're watching this, you will maybe just have a general understanding that in the US, yes, they do pay a lot more for their software developers, compared to here in the UK. It's worth saying that cost of living out there depends what state you're in, but if you're looking at Boston, New York, standard of living is crazily expensive too, so it does need to be high. But alongside these salaries, normally what happens in the US is the base salaries are lower because a lot of people want to join Series A, Series B scale-ups because of obviously the opportunity and high reward that can be had with the equity and RSUs that come within the compensation package. So that's something to bear in mind if you've got offices in the US, or if you're also looking for US talent at the moment. The salary is kind of you would angle it as a completely different conversation to if you were speaking to any candidate in Europe. So again, I thought this was a really important graph to actually put. This again is based on the survey that I personally sent out to my network. How do they feel they're being paid? I think within software development, it is in Europe and the US per se a sector that does definitely pay higher than the average UK salary or European salary, for example. It is a very, very niche and specialized skill set where often software developers come from a university background, but because just purely due to the high demand for tech, and that's the way that, the world is going towards a more tech-driven world, we do need these engineers. So about 50% genuinely did say that they feel like they're being paid fairly. 20% even said, well, they might even appreciate that they know that they're probably getting paid a pretty good salary for the work that they're doing, and 29% said underpaid. We just had a question come through. So how is the current job market for Java stack development as a software engineer right now? I'm going to save that question for the end, actually, if that's okay, just because what we're doing here is just kind of focusing on specifics, and then what I can do is actually at the end, if everyone wants, I can spend 5 minutes talking about what we're seeing right now in the day-to-day. Although this report is kind of explaining that, I can kind of just give a brief summary of what I've noticed in the first couple of weeks of January so far, and what I anticipate over the next kind of few weeks to come. So I'll hold that one. As far as benefits go, pretty standard. I feel like if you're working for a company that has, I would say, 150 plus employees, it must, sorry, not it must, but it will probably mean that your organization has a kind of HR setup, so to speak, and someone that will be able to kind of really focus and hone in on the culture and also the comp side of your package. So what we typically see in tech is kind of the kind of classic medical care, gym memberships, depending on the company that you're in. You might get free lunch, but I think that was only about 10% of people who do. I think remote working is obviously probably the benefit that, professionals are maybe more interested in than something like a free lunch, but obviously everyone's different. But that, as we mentioned at the beginning of this kind of LinkedIn Live, is actually something that, you do need to be taking account as an organization, because 81% of people said that they wouldn't take a job if there wasn't some degree of flexibility in there. So what are the important factors? Again, from my little survey, what did people find important, right, when looking for a new job? So again, if you're a candidate watching this video and you're currently in your job hunting journey, you might be able to resonate with some of these, but no surprise that salary is probably going to be an important factor for most people. We've got to put food on the table. But what we typically see as well in tech, which I think is quite uncommon with other sectors, is that people genuinely change if they think that the project is right, or there's an opportunity to learn, or they're really bought into the company's product or vision. That is enough sometimes for someone to maybe steer away from a financial product that they're working on to maybe something in health tech, where it's actually, looking at stem cells and helping, diagnose cancer. So that's something that we're seeing as well, but obviously pretty high on the top after salary is the flexible remote working that we've mentioned already. So are these developers actually getting offered the remote working or flexi time? Most of them said yes, which is great, because that obviously shows that employers are really responding to like genuine opinions and sort of needs from their developers, which is great, because once you've got your good engineers within your team, they're kept happy, you want to keep them. And this is again the respondents of my survey, are you actually being offered remote and hybrid working? Most of them did say yes anyway, which is great. Would Java and Kotlin professionals accept a job that did not offer remote working? That is that all-important stat that I mentioned earlier, which is, I think the results here speak for themselves, that there does need to be some element of flexibility. And then how many days do you actually work remotely? Most of the respondents obviously on this survey were remote workers. Maybe they pop in once a month. That's something we're seeing as well. I've got quite a lot of my clients who say, look, we do want some degree of face-to-face time, especially if there's a lead or a principal. We want them to work with the juniors, but there's full flexibility. But and with so, the Java developers are absolutely fine, popping in a couple of times a month. But I think it's just more that out of necessity and being ring fenced around a certain day and time really puts a lot of people off. So what else have they said in the survey? So this is just a bit of a breakdown as to who actually answered the survey, but most of the people that I asked actually had over 10 years of experience working with Java. So I would say this is more for like a senior candidate pool, is where we got the responses from, which is great because these are individuals that have worked in the sector for a long time, have maybe learnt the foundations, they've gone through the motions, they themselves are quite autonomous. So it's really giving us a good understanding of how, these senior individuals, which are really, really hard to get your hands on, really want to be working. How many are using Kotlin commercially? So like we said, it is on the rise. It's still relatively new, but if you are a Java developer, I would 100% recommend after this call, if you've never ever touched Kotlin before, go look into it, because what we're seeing is a lot of Java migrations to Kotlin, or new startup scale-ups that are starting now or are a couple of years old. A lot of them actually did pick Kotlin as their kind of main programming language. So it's nice to see that about a quarter of the respondents do use it alongside the Java, but I would anticipate over the next even 12 months that number will go up quite considerably in terms of people that haven't used it. Well, actually, the number go down. Sorry, I feel like I hope that made sense for everyone. And I think that is the end. So thanks to obviously all those that have made it through to the end of the report. So first off, if obviously you've got a meeting coming up, if you would like a copy of this report, feel free to email me at cyoung@understandingrecruitment.com, or otherwise you can actually just pop me a LinkedIn message as well, requesting it, because it's not available on the website as of yet. So if you do want a hard copy now, just drop me a message and I'll speak to you. Equally, if you want something a little bit more tailored around your company, its sector, or if you're a candidate, something that's more to your specific background, again, feel free to message me directly, because this was quite a general overview of the Java market globally. But what I'm happy to do now is move on to the Q&A session. So if anyone has some questions coming up that you felt like I didn't address, I'm more than happy to. Okay, so we've got, since AI or Gen AI is relatively new, what are the projects or certifications that employers are looking for other than professional experience? This is a really interesting one, because I have my colleague Anna Hennigan. Again, if you're on a computer, just quickly pop on LinkedIn and go follow her too, because she heads up our AI and machine learning team. So the machine learning and AI sector has always been extremely competitive to go into. What I would say 5 years ago, to be a machine learning engineer or to work in AI, you didn't need to have a PhD in that. I think in the last 5 years, that's really changed. I would say, for the argument's sake, that you still need to go into those sectors because they are still so competitive. You do need to have a computer science degree or software engineering degree. Like, you will find it really hard. It's not impossible, of course, but it's just who you're competing against in terms of application and interview stages. So definitely make sure that you've got the computer science baseline. If you don't want to obviously enroll on a master's for obviously obvious reasons, I would really have a look at like Stanford or MIT AI courses, because they do a bunch of them. And we actually placed 2 developers last year that have basically just done exactly like I've said, and they are now working at a financial company on a Gen AI project that they're building. And they had the software engineering background, which was great, which made them great coders. And then they obviously had that kind of avid interest in AI. And they had done so through, signing up to and enrolling on the modules that are available from some of the universities like Cambridge, Oxford, MIT, and obviously plenty of them in the US like offer them completely remote, and you just kind of work your way through those modules. And that shows that you are going above and beyond. You know, not everyone has time to do a full-time master's if they're working already, but if that's a sector that you know that you want to go into, I would definitely recommend, you know, spending a few hours after work or on weekends, kind of just securing those modules. And what that allows you to do is actually complete modules across different areas of ML, AI, or Gen AI as well. Okay, so we said that we'd come back to this one. So what does it look like today? And that's a really important question, because if you maybe went on right at the beginning of this LinkedIn Live, I talked about how actually, you know, 2023, straight off January, you know, the whole sector was rocked with the layoffs in the FANG industry, which obviously then kind of had that ripple effect all the way down to the kind of smaller organizations as well. And I think it's safe to say, you know, you might have seen it in the news recently. I feel like we're having a smaller sense of deja vu coming into this January. Obviously, nowhere near the gravity and extent that we saw in 2023. But the amount of candidates that I've been speaking to that have recently been affected by redundancy and layoffs in the last couple of months has kind of definitely increased over, you know, if we look at a 6-month period. So I would say that it's in a really good place. I have, in the last 6 months, in the same breath, not seen as many vacancies, postings, organizations hiring. So it's just kind of a bit of a mix at the moment, in terms of some companies doing layoffs, and then some, maybe because last year was so difficult in terms of cash flow problems, that actually talent teams, engineering teams have really had to strategize really carefully of, we still have project deadlines we need to meet, and we do need to grow to some extent. So how are we going to do this without, you know, doing it unsustainably and also meeting budgetary requirements? So I would say if there's any month that I've seen in the last 6 months that's the best right now for a Java developer, it's actually where we are at right now, despite maybe what I said was a bit conflicting 2 minutes ago about the fact that I've seen layoffs too. But I think that's just really dependent on the sector and the organization itself. Got another question. Will employers accept career changer candidates from non-IT to IT for entry-level roles? Yes, they will. In my experience, have I seen it? No, not with the clients that I've worked with, because there's obviously, when you're an entry level, you know, you've just finished university, you've always got that pool of computer science graduates that are going to be applying to all sorts of tech positions, most of them being software engineers. So you're always going to be competing, in that case, with someone who's been doing software engineering for the last 3 years. So it will be quite difficult in a sense to just go from something like, I don't know, maths or physics straight into software development, when you could actually be competing against someone in the process who's been doing computer science. What will work if you're going from non-IT to IT is to actually go through a training academy that basically partners itself. It will train you up in a respective programming language, obviously, that you want, quite intensely for the first few weeks. And then what these big training academies do, so there's Makers Academy, Lewagon, for example. If obviously you want some academies that do this quite well, just ping me a message afterwards. But what they will do is they will train you up in the language, and then they will actually secure you a position within a company without you obviously having to do a job hunt yourself. And that, I think, for the first couple of years of your career could be a really good way to get into the sector. I've had it with one of the candidates that I placed, lovely candidate who had, I think, 8 years of experience last year when I placed him. But he initially had done a physics degree at a Russell Group, I think it was Warwick. And he went through one of these academies that put him in, trained him up more in Java, because he hadn't really touched that in physics, and put him onto a project, obviously getting some commercial experience working in software development. He then moved to one of the investment banks and was there for 6 years. And then obviously last year, he was completely able to continue along that path of being a software engineer. But I would just say, if you're doing it on your own, I don't think you realize the competition that you're up against. So it would be best to go through one of these academies first. I'm currently working with the MERN stack, and I want to add other languages like .NET, Java, and Python due to the job market. While my personal preference is Java, considering the increasing involvement of AI these days, it might be beneficial to learn Python. Alternatively, I could stay with the MERN stack and further polish my skills. It's a tricky one, because I would say that to reach higher salaries, to be more employable, from my experience as a tech recruiter, the more specialized you are in a certain domain, the more successful you are in terms of your application acceptance. Because if a company is really looking for a Java developer, if you've got someone with 10 years of only Java developer experience, they're going to think, and they probably will be a better fit than someone who's got kind of a bit of everything. Full stack, I would say, is kind of dying out. What I've noticed is that maybe 5 years ago, a lot of companies were hiring full stack, I think, as a way to just try and get someone to really help out in all aspects of a project. But is it better to have someone who's a bit more of a jack of all trades, or someone who's super specialized in one area? So actually having a really specialized back-end person and a really specialized front-end person. As far as like the question bit about, do I pick Java? Do I pick Python? I think that is a personal choice in terms of the language that you feel you best work alongside, because you're always going to be better, or 99% of the time you will be better in something that you love and that you prefer working on. What Python does is kind of cross that line where you branch into data engineering and also data science as well. So that could be something worth considering. And I would say, the majority of the AI sector is Python heavy, but I think it's just a question of kind of weighing up the pros and cons, if I were you, and really what you want to spend time working on, versus the whole idea of, do I just stay specialized as a front end developer, or do I suddenly kind of make the direction to go full stack? Do we work with front end? So whilst I don't speak to front end developers, so to speak, obviously I do have requirements that come up time to time where I have a client needing someone with really strong Java skills and maybe a bit of like TypeScript, React, Angular experience as well on the UI side. You would be best actually contacting my colleague Leo Sparks. So he heads up our front end recruitment team. So anything JavaScript, TypeScript, all of the frameworks, that's what his team covers. And I'm not sure, have a little look at the Understanding Recruitment page if he's also doing a LinkedIn Live as well about the front end report, because that could be definitely something that you might be interested in as well. Oh, I like this question. Which languages are replacing Java along with Kotlin? I mean, you've said it yourself. So Golang and Rust are emerging technologies that we see cropping up way more now than we did, say, for example, 3 or 4 years ago, where it was literally a needle in a haystack of Java and Python developers only. Obviously, these specific languages have been created to address specific problems. Again, technology is all about using the right tool for the right job. So funnily enough, even as a recruitment agency, we have been seeing the rise in popularity of languages like Golang and Rust. And therefore, there has been a niche and a market for whether you're a blockchain, Solidity, or crypto startup that is kind of adopting these technologies. We've had to cater their needs to what we can actually service as well. So I do actually have colleagues that head up a Golang and Rust team. So if you have any specific questions around that, I would say go and ask them. But just as far as my observations, are there other languages replacing Java? What we're seeing is that if there is a startup, say you were a startup, you're going to set your own company up tomorrow, build a product. I think a lot of the maybe top 5 languages that are being used by scale-ups at the moment are Java, Kotlin, Python, Go. And I'm seeing obviously quite a lot of emphasis on the front end side of things, whether it be Node.js, TypeScript, heavy. Rust is still so small as a community, it is definitely growing, but I don't think it's replacing Java, so to speak, and it has different uses as well. Besides messaging queues, or what other tech stacks should a developer or Java developer be adding these days? So if you haven't had any exposure to public cloud technologies, that is the number one thing that you need to be doing. Anything on AWS, GCP, and Azure. I would obviously pick AWS just because I've seen most companies use AWS, but obviously GCP is quite a popular one as well. That's definitely what you want to be exploring. As far as DevOps tools go for containerization and orchestration, Docker, Kubernetes are really, really in high demand, and they are what's most used as well. Jenkins for managing, Terraform and Ansible, I would say are good ones as well to be adding to your repertoire. But above all of that, if we're just looking at in general, I would say Kotlin, but that is a language. But if we're looking at kind of tools, those are the ones that I would recommend. Which EU country do you prefer to hire with visa? Which EU countries prefer to hire with visa sponsorship for non-EU candidates? Also, is there a way we can know how to approach them? So visa sponsorship, I'll be honest, is something that I haven't had too much experience working with because it depends on companies' licenses and policies with the government. So it's completely not my input at all. It's due to a company's kind of legislation that they have with that specific country that they're operating in. From my experience, I think that Germany is one that does have a lot of opportunities where they're open to sponsoring. And maybe towards kind of Central Europe as well. So Austria and the Czech Republic as well is just from what I've seen. In the UK, it's still not something that is kind of massive. I really hope that obviously we provide opportunities globally because there's talent, such great talent all across the globe, across every continent. But I think especially with some Brexit rules, it's something that is definitely not super common right now. What is the most used cloud technology with Java? It's AWS for sure, followed by GCP, then Azure, but AWS number one. What about reduced hours work? Interesting one. It's not something that I've seen very much at all in my experience. It's a shame because if a company was, open to a reduced hours contract or, the whole 4-day work week. I do work with one company that offers the 4-day work week and the 3-day weekend for the same, salary as someone who works 5 days a week. And it always has so much popularity and interest. But just as a general rule, I think because the tech industry is in such high demand and, there's a shortage of software engineers as a general rule, that reduced hours is something that, a lot of companies can't even consider because they do need the work to be done. So it's not something, unfortunately, that we're seeing a lot of. I really hope that changes because I think there's a lot of people's personal circumstances and situations where they would thrive in a reduced hours environment and be able to make really significant contributions. And just the fact that it's, a full-time job means they can't even apply to it because it doesn't work. So I really hope we see that improve. But unfortunately, I think that's something that the sector still needs to work quite heavily on. So I think that's wrapping us up. We have literally taken the whole hour and I didn't expect that. So thank you so much for all your questions. So as a big reminder, after this, please go ahead straight away. Drop me a connection on LinkedIn. I love to grow out my network. I've got so many great and talented individuals over there, across all sectors, whether you are candidates, heads of talent, and hiring managers as well. If you would like a hard copy of this report, you will need to email me because it's not available anywhere. So you can drop me an email. It's literally written below, but it's my first letter of my first name with my surname at understandingrecruitment.com. And just worth mentioning again that Kirsty, my colleague, will be doing the Kotlin report. So if that's something that you're looking into or have interests in, please join her at 11 a.m. on the 6th of February. It's a Tuesday, and she'll be doing very, very similar discussion with you, more on the Kotlin front. But thank you so much for all of your time. I hope that was really transparent and valuable for you. And if there's anything that you would like to discuss further or want more tailored insights on, just drop me a message on LinkedIn or via email, and I'll be really happy to help you. But thank you so much for joining, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you soon.